This is East Carolina Offensive Coordinator Donnie Kirkpatrick. We are talking one of my favorite things, Pirate football, and the Sports Objective.
My heart is purple and gold. I'm a pirate down to my soul, and I don't back down, not at all. Find out when the cannons explode, from the sidelines down to the post. Put it down like not even close. All out to the last whistle blow. From the flag with the soul and crossbones. Everybody stand up, get your hands up. Let a team know that we got they back. This is our house, this is our town, our time. Every 1-9 copy.
How about those friggin' Pirates?
What is going on, Pirate Nation? Welcome into the Sports Objective. Today we're talking Pirate football. The first week of camp is in the books, and we'll discuss that more during the second half of the show. But this first half will be focused on what will be the Pirates' 8th game of the 2023 schedule. They'll be heading out to the Alamodome to take on the UTSA Roadrunners, and what a tremendous amount of success Jeff Traylor and the Roadrunners have had in recent seasons. And to discuss that and more, welcome in for the first time the publisher and producer of the Alamo Audible, and that is Jared Kalmus. Jared, we appreciate your time this afternoon.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no doubt. What a tremendous amount of success and the Coach Traylor and the Roadrunners have had. 23 wins, 2 Conference USA titles over the last 2 seasons. Just an unbelievable player at quarterback in Frank Harris. What a Redshirt Super Super Senior now, having been there 7 years. We as Pirate fans, with Holton Ahlers moving on, going to be very weird to have someone else behind center. But now the Roadrunners once again have Frank Harris. But before we talk this team specifically, let's just talk the big picture with UTSA coming into the American Athletic Conference. I know that fan base has to be excited about the move, and just talk about the growth of that program, because this is just the 13th year that UTSA will have played football.
Yeah, it's been nuts. I mean, I've been around since literally the first practice. I was at the first practice, and when I was a student, just seeing the growth, not just over the 13 years, but specifically the last 3 years, has been insane. I think a lot of people in San Antonio and, across the nation always saw UTSA as like a sleeping giant or whatever. You hear that term thrown a lot for G5 programs, and even the true believers amongst us always thought this was like 20, 30 years out. But to see it happen so quickly is really crazy. No doubt about it. And, Jeff Traylor, huge part of that. He's been an amazing coach for UTSA, and, his ability to connect with the community has paid a lot of dividends. And the administration just like so on board with football. Like, Roadrunner fans are very, very blessed to have this whole apparatus, not even just the coach, the AD, university president, but also the whole city of San Antonio is, so in UTSA's corner to help them, as much as they can to realize the success. So it's been a bit of a rocket ship, and, hopefully they're able to keep that steady and just keep the rise as they move into the AC.
Yeah, no doubt. And one of the things that stands out to me about this UTSA program is that in just year 3 of existence, back then in 2013, you sold close to 15,000 season tickets. Yes, there has been a dip in recent years, as has been the case around the country for many programs, East Carolina included. But just talk about the support that the San Antonio community in that city provide. It's almost like an NFL franchise, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the coolest things about the UTSA fan base is how many of the most diehard fans did not go to UTSA. It's really unique in that, I guess you could call them t-shirt fans or whatever, but have that for a G5 team is almost unheard of, really. I don't know if like UCF or Boise have had that in their history, but, being in a city of the size of San Antonio and having no pro team there, a lot of people, they grow up Aggie fans, Longhorn fans or whatever, but they don't have the personal connection to those programs like they might have for UTSA, where they might bump into a coach or a player, at the grocery store, or they definitely have neighbors that went there and stuff like that. So the whole city is just really latched on. And, from the alumni and student perspective, that's really interesting as well, because UTSA is such a young university. It was founded in 1969. It only really grew to be a major university, I would say, like in the past 15 to 20 years or so. So super, super young fan base. And that's interesting to see as well. And like you can kind of see, you forecast it out, the university keeps growing and the alumni base, increases in age. It has more like disposable income and more progressions in their career and stuff like that. There's still a lot of growth for UTSA to come in the coming years, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Bubba kind of alluded to it with the NFL thing. I've always kind of viewed the way that the city of San Antonio has embraced UTSA. It's been much like an NFL expansion team,
Yeah.
going into a new market where you have fans that attend the university, just people in the city embracing it, which is fantastic. I wish you could see more of that in college sports with schools like UAB, et cetera. Talk about, you mentioned how young the university is and the amount of fans that aren't alums. Without knowing my Texas geography wonderfully well, I know, have an idea of where San Antonio is. What is the next closest FBS program to UTSA?
Well, Texas State and San Marcos is maybe a 30-40 minute drive or something like that.
Okay, what about Power 5?
Power 5 would be Austin for UT. And that's
How far is that?
about an hour and a half drive.
Okay, so it's close enough where I'm sure there are a lot of Longhorn fans.
But yeah, there's a lot of like secondary Roadrunner fans, and that's an interesting debate. I think in the early years, no one really paid much mind to that, but then they get on the field last season, and it's a pretty close game for 3.5 quarters. So I think people are having to choose their sides a little bit more closely than they used to in the past. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap for sure.
That's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how you guys continue to grow. As we get into this year's team, I think you guys getting in the American with the television exposure. And actually, before we get into this year's team, I want to talk about two things we talked about backstage and just get your opinion on both. One would be the television exposure with now moving into the American, much better television contract. You're going to get multiple ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU opportunities. There's even opportunities for some ABC opportunities in there potentially. Talk about how you think that'll affect your program. And then secondly, we spoke backstage. You mentioned not playing SMU till 27. I completely think not doing divisions in this league. I understand why with the new playoff format, wanting to make sure the two best teams are playing for the conference championship. But I really believe this league, in terms of creating rivalries, would benefit from going to divisions, and just wanted to get your thoughts on both of those.
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part first. So, it's interesting because there's like the protected rivalry concept in the AAC scheduling where they do it out for several years, but there's one school that you're going back and forth with every year. For UTSA, that's Rice. And, it's a good experience for the fans to play at Rice because Houston, I think, is our second largest alumni base outside of San Antonio. And we'll have, 10,000 fans in Rice Stadium for that. And it's really cool. But is that best for developing the conference as a whole? Probably not. It's probably better for UTSA to play UNT or SMU, every single year, right? But I'm super in agreement that you got to do whatever you can to get the best team in the best position to get a playoff bid every year. So, I think maybe there's a scheduling change that kind of gets the best of both worlds. Maybe you expand those protected games a little bit, so it's a core of 3 or 4 teams that you're playing year in and year out. So I definitely see both sides of it there, and I'm sure Resco will tweak that as needed. As the playoff format probably changes in the future and all of that stuff. So we'll see how that turns out. But for UTSA fans, it's still a way better schedule than they've had conference wise ever. So it's hard to complain too much from the Roadrunner fan perspective. And then to speak to your first question about the exposure, man, it was really frustrating being Conference USA, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. Because not only UTSA, but the other like FAU had a great run, when Lane Kiffin was there, and UAB has been a great team for a long time, and then they just are not ever on national television, and then you turn into that weekly game on CBS Sports for Conference USA, and it's like, a 5-win Middle Tennessee team that there's no one in the stands, playing against a Charlotte team that's not really done much of anything.
Yeah,
CBS USA. So the exposure was just backwards. It was like the worst teams were getting the most exposure on TV, which made the league as a whole look low quality.
Yeah, you mentioned that about CBS Sports Network, which has limited distribution anyway, but
right.
They have a bad. I don't understand they get first pick for Conference USA. They're their primary partner. ESPN is secondary. But CBS Sports Network has this thing they do with Conference USA, as I'm sure where they'll go ahead and choose all their games before the season starts, rather than using a 12-game window and picking the best game.
Right. I have made that argument so many times heading into the AAC. It's like, you look at what the AAC does with especially at Thanksgiving weekend, right? So it's like UTSA and Tulane is probably going to be the game that gets selected. But I think it's like Memphis and FAU is also an option for that week. Like depending on which matchup is more engaging, like which of those teams might be ranked heading into that week. I mean, that's just how every other sport does broadcast selection. So I never really understood that from the Conference USA perspective. I don't know if they were more concerned about fairness, exposure for the teams or whatever, but it was a huge missed opportunity. And there's so many chances where Conference USA could have put their best foot forward, and we're not able to do so because of that TV deal. And that's not even getting into like getting on ESPN, ESPN2 and stuff like that. That's just purely like what programs you're choosing to put in the spotlight. So that's gonna be a huge change, compared to Conference USA.
A couple more big picture items before we dive into the 2023 Roadrunners. And I know you and I were discussing this earlier this afternoon off the air. And I was taking a look at the website, the Roadrunner Athletic Fund, UTSA's version of the Pirate Club. And then also, I know you're part of the Runners Rising Collective, the NIL of the Team Boneyard equivalent for UTSA, and then the athletic budget on Roadrunner Athletic Fund, and that it had gone the athletic budget that is from 28 or 29 million to 40 million this year and 45 next year. So if you would discuss that a little bit and how rapidly UTSA and its athletics program is rising.
Yeah, definitely. It's really sudden for sure. I think I just did the math earlier, and I think since athletic director Lisa Campos got to campus, operating budget's up like 45% or something like that, which is insane. And also you got to keep in mind there was zero TV money, in those years of Conference USA. They were getting like $500,000 a year or something like that, and that hasn't even factored into the budget for the Roadrunners yet. So getting access to, I think they're getting like $3.5 million in year one from the AAC, and that will go up, each year. So that's going to be huge. I think the program is still heavily subsidized by student fees, which I'm not sure how that compares to other AAC programs. I know a lot of them have, pretty hefty student fees. So that's still a big chunk, but we're definitely seeing more engagement from donors, both like alumni, but also just people around San Antonio that want to support the program, which is really cool. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the corporate space, getting more engaged with some of those large employers in the San Antonio area. But a lot of small business, especially in NIL. I mean, it's been really cool. Like there's you guys probably don't know what a Fruit 3 is and at ECU, but just like a local, Mexican candy fruit shop, an NIL deal with our Vanderbilt transfer running back. And, they were on campus, giving out stuff to the team as well. So it's just cool to see like all those small businesses latch on to the NIL opportunity and see the Roadrunners as like a legitimate marketing arm. As far as overall NIL collective spending, it's hard to say because there's 3 different collectives that are all pretty active in San Antonio. So I'm a part of Runners Rising, and we do all sports, but there's 2 others that are more focused heavily on football. And I mean, altogether, I don't know. I don't even want to hazard a guess, but I think it's really competitive for the G5, right? It's not an SMU level, I wouldn't say, but I think for the G5, it's probably pretty high up there as far as total money raised.
Yeah, according to Phil Steele, you guys had the highest rated recruiting class amongst the group of 5, so that speaks to your NIL. It has to. And you mentioned about getting the larger businesses in San Antonio involved. I think we already spoke to what's going to cause that, and that's the added TV exposure. When they see you on ESPN and ESPN2, they're going to want to get involved. What is it? Just one more quick question, and then we'll get into the 23 football season. What is your enrollment at UTSA?
I think they're about 33,000. They typically go up and down, 1,000 or 2,000 a year. But they do have plans to expand the downtown campus to have 5,000 to 6,000 students down there, and that would probably get them closer to the 40K range.
Okay, yeah, you can see the potential. It's just going to keep growing.
Go
ahead, Bob.
I was interested in that as well, Kyle, before the show, and the numbers I had found very similar to what Jared was saying. I think they projected or said that in 22 it finished up at 34,000, and then this year it may get as high as 38,000. But one final big picture question, and we've primarily focused on the football program. Talk about the other athletics teams within that program and making the transition to the American.
Maybe we should just stick to football. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so baseball's really strong. I think you guys will be really happy with the baseball program. ECU's baseball powerhouse. Facilities are less than a high school, right? So that needs some serious work. And you're going to see that for a lot of the Olympic sports at UTSA. Soccer is coming off a Conference USA championship, and they have a really nice facility. They've had an on-campus stadium there for a while. Just opened up a field house facility for them in track like 3 weeks ago. So that's a huge part of the puzzle right there. Women's basketball is kind of on the rise. They have Karen Aston, who was the head coach at UT Austin for a long time, and she's made an immediate impact, but she stepped into a really bad situation as far as roster composition goes. So she's been absolutely killing it in the recruiting trail, and we're seeing that team getting better and better. Men's basketball in a pretty gnarly state right now, for sure. So we'll see how that pans out, but that's... let's just say I was looking forward to Penny Hardaway coming to the Convocation Center, but looks like they avoided that on the schedule. Men's basketball is in a really bad spot right now.
Historically, at East Carolina, we can relate. Fortunately, things appear to be trending up under Mike Schwartz entering his second year. We were looking forward to hopefully getting Florida Atlantic at home, but unfortunately, that will not happen this year. But on the whole, Pirate basketball does appear to be trending up. And shifting to this Roadrunner team, and we've referenced him a time or two already. Frank Harris, standout quarterback. And tell us what makes him so great. The lefty that in the last 2 years alone has thrown for over 7,200 yards and run for about 1,200.
Yeah, man, a lot of stuff makes Frank special. I would say first and foremost, his ability to get out of the pocket with his legs is elite. He's not the fastest guy in the world, straight line speed, but he's pretty elusive and does a really good job of kind of like reading defenders. And that applies in passing game as well. So he's pretty good at avoiding turnovers. He doesn't have a cannon of an arm, but he can get it downfield. There might be a bit more of an arc to it than you would see from, a pocket passer like a Michael Pratt at Tulane. But, he does get the ball there for the most part. And he's got some really talented wideouts that help him out as well. But, with him being in the program for as long as he has, he's like a second coach out there. He can really run the offense on his own. Audibles and line of scrimmage and stuff like that. So just a really dynamic, special player.
Jared, as Bubba knows, and you'll learn if you become a regular on the show, I'm horrible with names, so you're gonna have to forgive me. Your running back graduated the best in school history. What was his name, just for reference? And
Sincere McCormick.
Yes. And so what do you guys have coming back? I know you got some transfers. Kid from Vanderbilt that you mentioned. So what's the running game looking like this year?
Yeah, definitely. So Sincere actually graduated the year before last. So last year.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. So last year, Brendan Brady was another super senior that stepped in. Always had injury troubles during his career, and unfortunately that played out last year as well. And there were several more injuries. I think UTSA had like 3 or 4 running backs that were in the injury room at some point last year. So they kind of turned to a true freshman, or he might have been a redshirt, but Kavorian Barnes is from a really tiny town out in East Texas, was not highly recruited. I think Army was after him, and maybe 1 or 2 other Texas FBS programs, but no P5s, no heavy hitters, and he just played a really small, low division of football, but he just exploded on the scene. He was the newcomer of the year in Conference USA. I think he might have been a freshman All-American, if I remember correctly. But he looked great, and he's put on about 10 pounds, 20 pounds of muscle or something like that over the offseason. So he's, undisputedly running back number 1. Depth behind him is super unproven. They did get that Vanderbilt transfer, Rocco Griffin, that I mentioned earlier. He's looked great. He was very explosive in the spring game, and he didn't look that fast on the field at Vanderbilt playing against SEC defenses, but you put him out there against a G5 defense, and he looks a lot faster for sure. So I think he's gonna get a lot of carries. I think he's gonna have a nice year. They also signed the number 1 JUCO running back, Robert Henry, who's been dealing with some injury issues. So we'll see if he's good to go. And then they signed the highest rated running back in program history out of the high school ranks. So he might get in the mix as well. So we'll have to see, but I think the run game should be pretty strong this year.
I know out wide you lose Zachary Franklin to the transfer portal, but you also have plenty of talent returning. And tell us about what you have at receiver.
Yeah, definitely. So it was kind of a 3-headed monster last year when Zachary was here, until he did hit the transfer portal. So Josh Cephas and JT Clark are the 2 names to know there. Both of them are coming off injury. JT's a little bit more severe than Josh's. Josh is at practice; he's good to go, but he's just kind of like a little banged up, I guess you could say. And then JT had a really horrible lower leg injury against UAB last season. So he's at practice, but it's non-contact kind of stuff. It sounds like he's going to be good to go for week 1 against Houston, but he might be a little bit limited. I think both of those guys are NFL receivers for sure. Josh plays in the slot, but he's 6'3", so he's kind of unique. He's got great hands. He's excellent, like those quick slants over the middle for the first down. That's really where he eats, and he's really good, after the catch as well. And then JT, he's prototypical NFL possession receiver size. He's 6'3", but he looks even taller. He's chiseled, super muscular. He's got great hops, amazing hands, and he's the deep threat. They love to throw that fade to him in the end zone, and most of the time he's going to come down with it. Both guys are great blockers as well, so really strong there. And they have some young guys that look really talented as well, but it's just hard to find snaps in that room because there's so much senior talent.
Clearly, with the offensive production UTSA's had on the offensive line has been solid, but how do they look going into 23?
Man, honestly, that's what I'm most excited about. Last year was, it's amazing that UTSA did what they did last year with all the injuries they had on the offensive line. They were down to the starting tackles at one point being a sophomore walk-on and a converted defensive tackle. And they were playing, Army, UT Austin, right? And they were just absolutely thrown into the fire. So they're able to get through that. Those guys are still there, but they went and got two incredible JUCO offensive tackles, and Daniel Ogundipe, who was a 4-star, and then Buffalo Cruz, who looks like he's already starting, in week 1. But those guys are next level athletes. Definitely not the type of athlete we've seen on the offensive line at UTSA before. And then the depth on the interior is crazy. They did graduate Ahufita Maka, who was, I think, a 3-year starter and just a really, really strong center. But they have a veteran interior lineman who's going to step into that role. And the guard position is just stacked. So, God forbid the injury are as bad as last year, but if they were to be, UTSA going to be in a much better spot depth-wise.
One of East Carolina's strengths is undoubtedly that defensive line, a lot of depth, and not really a standout guy that we've had at times in the past. But, Coach Houston has reiterated that a couple times already in the first week of camp, just how stout we've been in the trenches, and how excited he is about that. So that should be a heck of a matchup in late October with that offensive line of UTSA against the ECU defensive line.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a huge believer in depth on the defensive line. I think that's one of the most underrated things that kind of differentiates a good defense and a great one.
Yeah, it can help you win championships for sure. And speaking of defensive lines, why don't we segue to your guys' defensive line? What do you look like there for the 2023 Roadrunners?
Really similar to what Bubba described for ECU. I think they're legitimately 3 deep at all 3 down lineman positions. And then if we're going to include like kind of that edge rusher, so they'd have Trey Moore, who was an All-American freshman for UTSA as well, local product. I think he had 11.5 sacks last year as a freshman, which is insane. Obviously, there were transfer opportunities for him out there, and he chose to stay in San Antonio. But the position across from him is kind of up in the air right now. There's some good athletes there. And it looks like a guy might kind of be putting his foot down for that starting spot. But yeah, it's a really nasty front for UTSA for sure. There's a guy, Joe Evans, that transferred from LSU last season. He was hurt for most of last year, but when he was healthy, he was completely dominant. So if he's able to play a healthy 12 or 13 games or whatever this year, that's going to be a big difference maker for UTSA because you can really move that line of scrimmage.
Yeah, talk more about Trey Moore. I see 6'3", 235 pounds from San Antonio, and he set the school record for TFLs last year with 18.
Yeah, it's nuts. He was not, similar to Kavorian Barnes, he was not anywhere close to one of the more heralded recruits in that class. But as soon as he got on campus, you just start hearing a lot of reports from coaches and older players of how hard that guy was working, through the offseason and the weight room, stuff like that. So he's developed like to an insane degree compared to when he came out of high school. I think what makes him really good is his quickness. He's got good pass rush moves. He does a good job using his hands. But his football IQ is way beyond his years. In fact, I do film breakdowns of all of UTSA's games, and yesterday I was looking at the film breakdown I did for the U of H season opener last year, and one of Trey Moore's first plays as a Roadrunner was him, feinting a blitz and then dropping back into coverage and then picking up I think it might have been Tank Dell that was coming across for a first down, and Trey Moore got the pass breakup as a freshman, and just one of those things that you kind of take for granted. That, oh, that was a good play, but then you see this season that he went on to have, and you're like, wow, that was like pretty indicative of the kind of player he's going to become. So it's really sad to see him continue to develop.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, I was just going to ask about the rest of the defense overall, linebackers, the back end of the defense, safeties, corners, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the front five, I guess you could say, those outside linebackers and the down linemen are definitely the strength. Inside linebacker, they returned Jamal Ligon, who's been an all-conference player for them, is really strong. He'll be a 4-year starter for UTSA. But that other interior linebacker position next to him is still undecided. So I think Avery Morris is probably going to be the starter there, and he's been kind of developing into a strong player for UTSA, but hasn't really had a breakout performance yet. They do have some Power 5 transfers that are going to compete in that role as well, so we'll see if any of those guys win out. Out wide, they lost a tremendous cornerback, Corey Mayfield, who is in camp with the Ravens right now and had 2 interceptions in camp yesterday. So obviously it's a huge miss there. But they have some really strong players as well. Nick Troy Fortune transferred from West Virginia, and he was a really strong cornerback for UTSA last year. We'll expect to see him continue the same. And then the other cornerback positions kind of undecided. A lot of guys that were rotational last year. One of them's gonna have to step up. Zay Frazier is probably the pick there. So he was a 4-star that signed with Kentucky, and then before practicing to start at Kentucky, he transferred to UTSA. So kind of a unique situation there. But I think that cornerback position will work out. I'm more concerned about the safety room. Safeties have been an issue at UTSA for a while. They have a really strong all-conference player, Rashad Wisdom, who typically handles like kind of the strong safety role. But the depth there is very unproven. I would say definitely the weakest position on the roster as far as depth goes. So we'll have to see how that turns out, because I mean there's a lot of great passing offenses in the AAC. So might be some shootout for the Roadrunners for teams that can sling the ball around the yard.
A good D-line can make weak safeties look a lot better.
Yeah, and that was the concern last year, because I didn't know where the pass rush was going to come from, and then Trey Moore just comes out of nowhere and sets the program record for tackles for loss. So if he's able to keep that up, I think they'll be okay. But definitely a lot of communication errors the past 2 years in the back end of that secondary, so that'll need to get cleaned up for sure.
Last year, Jared, East Carolina certainly had some woes in the special teams phase, not so much in the coverage units or the return game, but the kicking, the PAT field goal operation left a lot to be desired, and then also unable to really flip the field the way you would like on punts. So you can tell us about the UTSA special teams.
Sure. So punt is in really good hands. So Lucas Dean returns. He's been an all-conference player for UTSA for what feels like forever. I feel like he's been here as long as Frank Harris has. I don't know. But I imagine he'll be one of the top punters in the conference from day one in the AAC. The kicking game is a whole different story. So UTSA has had 2 really strong kickers over the past couple of seasons, in Hunter Duplessis and Jared Sackett. But now, it's kind of up in the air of who's going to take that place kicking role. I think they just got a transfer from like Alabama or somewhere like that. I don't know if he kicked where he came from. That's a pretty recent development. But I would say kicking duties are completely undecided right now. And that's another one of the biggest concerns that I have for this team, is just what that's going to look like. Because, if you can't consistently get that 35-yard field goal, that's going to lose you some games for sure.
Well, hopefully you guys won't need a 35-yard field goal in week 1 as you take on the Houston Cougars. Last year, that game went into overtime down in San Antonio. This year it's at Houston. Now y'all are in the American. They're in the Big 12. I'm calling that. I don't know what the spread is on that game. I'm going to have to check. I'm assuming it's obviously already out.
Yeah, it's like Houston by 2 or something like that.
Okay, I'm calling the Roadrunners in the week 1 upset. I'm taking it straight up. Don't take the points. Bet it straight up. Roadrunners are going to go into Houston and get a big win for the league.
Love it. Love the optimism, Kyle. I feel pretty good about it. It's going to be an outdoor game in Houston and on September 2nd, so it's going to be super warm, no doubt. But it definitely feels like the Roadrunners are still kind of trending upwards, and things have been a little bit shaky under Dana at U of H. So we'll see how it plays out. But if I have a 7th-year quarterback against a new starter for another team, I'm probably going to pick the 7-year returner if those teams seem to be as equal as UTSA and U of H were last year.
Yeah, Houston, all they're going to be thinking about is that Big 12 schedule. They ain't got time for no Roadrunners.
The other games in the non-conference, you have Texas State at home, in week 2, Army at home in week 3, and then the final week of September. Well, excuse me, the next to last week of September, because you're open the final weekend in September. So on September 23rd, you travel to Rocky Top to take on the Big Orange. I know your fan base has to really be fired up about that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I have someone text me every week asking like where can they find a hotel in Knoxville? And the answer is like there aren't any. It's too late. You should have booked 3 months ago. But yeah, I mean overall it's a really sweet out of conference lineup for UTSA. I don't know if you guys know this, but Texas State is traditionally our primary rival in athletics. It hasn't really played out that way in football just because Texas State just really has not been competitive. So UTSA has dominated that series, but it's still going to be a great crowd. I mean, there'll probably be 40,000 if not more in the Alamodome for that game. And then San Antonio is a huge military hub. So anytime, an armed service team is in San Antonio, it's going to be a big crowd. So really excited about that one. And Tennessee is a heck of a challenge. It's a great opportunity, I think, for UTSA to prove like they're ready for that next jump, right? Because they feasted on Conference USA competition for the past couple of years, but you haven't seen them have that big breakout win against a strong Power 5 program or even against a ranked opponent. UTSA hasn't beat a ranked opponent ever, right? So it's going to be a great opportunity, and it's going to be a tough game for sure, but it's going to be a great experience for the fans that are traveling and the players themselves for sure.
If you need a hotel, obviously people from North Carolina are more familiar with East Tennessee by and large, people from Texas. But if you can't find a hotel in Knoxville, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville are full of them, and a lot of fun things to do there.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
Go stay there and make the drive up to Knoxville.
Yeah, it's a beautiful drive too.
Definitely.
Yeah, no doubt. And speaking of hotels and things to do and so forth, I know some East Carolina friends of mine are going to be making the trip out to San Antonio there in the final week of October. Unfortunately, I cannot make the trip. Definitely would like to in the future, but provide the information that you can. Whether it's parking, hotels. Obviously, plenty to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first off, I think any fans that make the trip are can have a great time. I mean, even outside the football aspect, San Antonio is a great travel destination, and the Mexican food is amazing. Obviously, barbecue is great. But with them playing in the Alamodome, you're walking distance from a Riverwalk hotel, right? So I would recommend parking at the hotel, and if you're not, it's like maybe a mile walk depending where you stay. So if you don't want to do a mile walk, you can get one of those like rentable scooters or just take an Uber. Because parking at the Alamodome is pretty tough. I was talking to you guys before we started recording. They sell out the parking passes, as soon as they go on sale every single year. And there's cash lots that you can get, close by. But, if you're staying, I would recommend staying in the Riverwalk and just walking or taking a scooter over. The tailgating scene is unreal. I mean, you guys would be shocked at how strong tailgating is at UTSA, and it has been since year one. We might be new to football, but we're not new to tailgating. People have been tailgating Longhorn games and the Alamo Bowl and all of that for decades. So that's one area that we're certainly Power 5 ready. And it's like 2 massive lots right next to the Alamodome. So not a lot of schools have that great of a setup for tailgating. So I think folks would be impressed. And definitely eat at Pinkerton's Barbecue if you can. I know it's a different kind of barbecue than you guys are used to in the Carolinas, but it's high quality stuff for sure.
Pinkerton's Barbecue, and what's the best Mexican place? Give me your
I always
top
tell
3.
people, just find any place that has like Jalisco in the name, and you're gonna be happy. As far as downtown goes, I don't know. I don't really go out on the Riverwalk too much for Mexican food because it's a little bit more corporate kind of chain type stuff. But I would just recommend the Hole in the Wall Taqueria is usually the way to go.
All right, Bob, you got anything else?
No, Jared, really appreciate your time. Actually, one of our viewers did have something for you, though. Justin Butts chiming in via Facebook this afternoon, and he actually has a couple questions here for you. And first, since we're discussing different restaurants and so forth, he says, I want to know where I can get a good steak in San Antonio.
A good steak? Okay, hold on. I got to Google it because I forgot. But my buddies took me off for like a mini bachelor party in downtown. Let me Google and remember what the name of that place was, because it was really freaking good.
All right, so
and while you're
here it is.
while you're searching,
he's got it.
I got it. Bohannon's Prime Steaks and Seafood. It's downtown. It's right up the Riverwalk. Amazing service, great steak. You won't go wrong.
Bohannon's. All right.
I do recommend getting a reservation though.
Get a reservation. A reservation. I can't even say it. Get a reservation, Justin. They might not even let Justin Butts in, even with a reservation.
So there you go. Bohannon's Prime Steaks and Seafood. So definitely check that out. J-Dog chimes in on YouTube saying the Riverwalk is awesome. Been there many times. And then Justin also wanted to get your thoughts on realignment and everything that's going on with the Pac-12 shrinking from 12 to 4.
Yeah, it's been crazy and a little sad also to see such a historic conference like the Pac just essentially disintegrate overnight. But it's kind of the world we live in, I guess. I guess like my prediction for what happens next, I think the most likely outcome is usually the one that's going to happen, and that's the Pac and the Mountain West just merging. But I could see like Cal and Stanford kind of turning their nose up at that and going independent as well.
I'll tell you an interesting thought.
Yep.
Talking about Stanford turning their nose up. You haven't heard it. You haven't heard it yet, but it's going to be coming. Stanford ain't going to want to play in a conference with anybody in the Mountain West outside of Air Force. But they probably wouldn't mind playing in a conference with Rice and Tulane and SMU, just based on what they are and what those schools are. So just keep that in mind. It would not surprise me to see a pitch to try to get those 4 to join the American and then 2 more from the Mountain West to go to 20. Would not.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. And you got to keep in mind, Stanford and Cal like turning their nose up at like less academic institutions is what got them into this mess in the first place, because they did not want to take those like Texas schools. They could have had TCU, they could have had U of H, even after they failed to get UT and OU. So I definitely think that's a legitimate opportunity. But I think what's going to be the catch is the exit fees are so high for both the Mountain West and the AAC, and that TV deal is just not going to be enough money to be worth the exit fee. So I don't know.
No, I think those 4 are coming here. I think those 4 are coming here with 2 from the Mountain West.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. And especially the Pac is willing to eat some of those exit fees for the Mountain West, because they're going to have some money in the coffers, once all the realignment shakes out. So we'll see.
I don't think the Pac-12 is going to survive. I think we're saying it 2 different ways. I think the Pac-12. I don't think you're going to see American and Mountain West teams join the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 is going to be gone, and those. We'll see how it plays out, but. I'm in agreement. I don't think they're going to want. I don't think Pac-12 fans are going to be okay with just merging with the Mountain West. They're going to want something else, and I think a true coast-to-coast league could be appealing to them, and probably get all of us some decent television money.
Yeah, I think the best of the rest model, so to speak, makes a lot of sense, and I think on a long enough timeline, that's what it's going to turn into. It might not be till 2026, 2027, something like that, but I think at some point in time, that's going to be the reality.
And Jared, we have one more comment or question here from Robert Dedrick. Said he got here late and he apologized if you already discussed this, but he said, does UTSA still have that monster tight end, number 9? It's like 280 pounds and very athletic.
Yeah, that's Oscar Cardenas, and he's returning. He might have another year after this one. I'm not sure. But yeah, his ability to move at that weight is nuts. I mean, he's an elite blocker. And it's not that he's like a massive threat in the passing game, but he just comes up clutch. Every time UTSA needs that big play, he somehow finds a way to get open and come down with some crazy catch. So hopefully see him used more in the passing game this year. We'll see how that shakes out with Zakari out. They might look to Cardenas more often this year, but yeah, he's definitely a big difference maker for UTSA for sure.
Well, certainly appreciate the visit, Jared. You've been very generous with your time, spending about 40 minutes with us. And, before we let you go, talk about the Alamo Audible, tell folks how they can tune in, whether it's on podcast platforms or otherwise. And then also, Underdog Dynasty and then tell them about what you do with Runners Rising.
Yeah, I'll go in reverse order, I guess. So for Runners Rising, I'm the director of technology. So I manage all the back end technology stuff. I built our website. And just to kind of help with automation to keep our operations really lean and all of that good stuff. And then for Underdog Dynasty, I was co-manager there for several years and still kind of pitch in with articles if I have something that wouldn't really make sense for Alamo Audible. I like to cover the UT RGV program that's starting up down there on the border. So sometimes I'll, pitch in an article like that or something fun. And then for Alamo Audible, we kind of do a bit of everything. So we've been covering the football program since I think 2016, primarily a podcast with myself and my co-host Adrian Bermudez. But we also have a dedicated baseball member now who does baseball coverage on what we call Around the Bird Bath. I've got a soccer episode dropping tomorrow. We do have a YouTube channel, a lot of written content on there. So yeah, I mean, we got it. We got all our bases covered. Just trying to get more sports in as much as possible. So hopefully the listeners will give us a follow at Alamo Audible and check out our content there. We're going to start season preview Wednesday.
Definitely will. Familiar with the podcast when we'll subscribe to YouTube here, following the show, but appreciate the visit, appreciate the wealth of information. Best of luck to the Roadrunners this year, with the exception of the final week of October, and I will probably catch up with you game week.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
There you have Jared Kalmus. He is with the Alamo Audible. Appreciate his information about the UTSA Roadrunners. Definitely a very good addition to the American.
Yeah, no doubt. I of all the schools we brought in, the only negative to UTSA to me is how far it is from Greenville. But certainly a school that you don't mind joining the conference they've had so much success in such a short period of time. They already have a fan base. When you talk media markets, I don't like to do that, but in this case, I think it applies because they are the only pro team. The only pro team in the city that large is the Spurs. So UTSA gets a lot of attention there. I think it's the best addition of all the schools that were added to the American. I think UTSA is the best addition by far for football. Certainly, Florida Atlantic for basketball. You would be the other.
Yeah, definitely agree. And obviously UAB has had a lot of on the field success in recent years under Bill Clark. And their support has definitely improved from what it was once upon a time.
Stadium definitely has.
Say it again.
Stadium definitely has.
Yeah, definitely totally different venue there, as the Pirates found out playing there against Coastal Carolina in the Birmingham Bowl this year, as opposed to the old Legion Field, which was an interesting venue to visit. I remember initially going there back in 2006 for the PapaJohns.com Bowl against South Florida, and it was something I looked forward to, but at the same time, it had more than past its prime, to say the least, and that new stadium was desperately needed.
Yeah, I had a conversation with two boys, Eric Church, Cody Jenkins concert Friday night in Raleigh, that had made the drive up from near Auburn, and they're huge Auburn fans. And we had a conversation about the Birmingham Bowl. They watched it last year and had been, when Auburn had won in previous years, and talked about, just what an improvement that was for the bowl game and UAB to have that new stadium and the downtown area and all that versus the old Gray Lady Legion Field and just, and these are Auburn fans making those comments. So huge improvement for UAB.
As you see there on the bottom of the screen for our viewers and for our listeners, it is an ad for East Carolina football season tickets. And we're just over 14,000. Last year we were 15,835. So, roughly 1,700 shy of where we were a season ago. I think, to be exact, now we're 14,200 per John Gilbert as of a couple days ago. So a little disappointing. I can't say I'm totally surprised, but hopefully Pirate fans, there are always those that are waiting to the last minute to do things. So hopefully in these next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll have a strong push and, maybe sell more than we did a year ago.
Hopefully, can we move 800 and get to 15,000? Do you know what those upper deck season ticket prices are? I was wondering if we could do anything to try to, cut some deals here late to get more people to buy the season tickets.
Yeah, I'll confirm this. And I want to say that
there's a value area that's like in the corner.
Yeah, you have that section or two where last year with 7 games, it was up to 125. I think that's back down to 99, the fan zone.
There you go. I mean, those have got to be sold out. If you're on and none of our viewers are going to be on the fence. But if you are, or if you know people that are on the fence, the casual fans, maybe you're just new to Greenville looking for something to do, tell them about that fan zone, $99 season tickets. That's 6 Saturdays worth of, or 5 Saturdays, 1 Thursday worth of entertainment for $100. You can't beat that.
115. I misspoke. It's
Still, you can't beat it.
Yeah, you can't beat that. And I'm $15. But then you had the upper sideline. If you want to be if you don't mind being in the upper deck, and because that's where I sat. I had my season ticket there back in 2021. And just a variety of reasons. My season ticket was not where my parents was, on the south side of the stadium, right there in front of Town Bank Tower. But 165 for the upper sideline. I was the lower part of the upper deck, right at the 50-yard line. You can't beat it. Very good seats. Yes, compared to some upper decks, yes, it is pretty high, but at the same time, it's a very good seat, and the depth perception isn't as awkward, for lack of a better way of putting it, like I was down at Clemson back years ago when the Panthers were playing there back in the mid-90s. So that's the only time I've been to a game in Death Valley, and you would see passes you would think that were overthrown and be right on the money.
Just turn your head to the left and watch the scoreboard.
Yeah. But and then the lower level sideline, 260, and then Pirate Club chairback, 325. But yeah, plenty of excellent options available, I'm sure, in the upper deck or otherwise. So call 1-800-ECU.
Yeah, I just kind of think the people that are going to get the chairbacks, et cetera, those are bought.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
I was just throwing that in there, but yeah, those people have by and large renewed, or they know they haven't renewed, and they'll be taking care of that hopefully. But yeah, for the most part, you're looking at those other two price ranges that you mentioned, Kyle. Also, like I mentioned a couple times with Jared, obviously the first week of camp's in the books, 4 practices for Mike Houston and the Pirates. And I know you've had the opportunity, as I did, to listen to some of Coach Houston's post-practice remarks from days 1 and 4.
Yeah.
What were some of your takeaways?
He talked about working special teams. I noticed yesterday, getting as much live. He didn't say it, but he implied that we're doing more live reps of special teams than we have in the past during fall camp, because he talked about wanting to get as many live reps of special teams as we possibly can. He talked about the competition amongst kickers was very strong. You can tell he is very bullish on two things: his defense as a whole and his running game. And he also seemed very optimistic about the offensive line. I think the question marks on this football team are at quarterback and receiver. Bubba, talk about, I'm always horrible with names. What you took away from the comments about receivers and some of the transfers, not knowing how to practice yet, and kind of what your takeaways were from that.
Yeah, Coach Houston really emphasized on how strong those returning guys, the Shane Calhoun at tight end, and then also Josiah Hatfield, Jalen Johnson, and then Kerry King. They've been very solid, those 4. Then you have Brock Spalding. He and Jari Patterson have also been performing very well. But then he said those other guys, the Chase Sowell, Keelan Robinson, the transfers from Colorado and Kansas respectively, that they really need to continue to come along. And he thinks that they will. He said it's not a matter of them, not being competitive and not putting forth the effort. It's just it's clear that they haven't had as many reps with Mason Garcia and Alex Flynn as those other 6 that I referenced.
I picked up a little bit also, just talking about the way people practice at other places, and I picked up a little bit of challenging guys without calling them out in those press conferences. I didn't know if you kind of picked up the same thing.
Definitely did. He called out some of those transfer portals, transfers, and guys that the Pirates plucked out of the transfer portal, and he did reference a couple specifically, but I will say that this is one that he did not mention in that light was Ra Dilworth. He talked about how Ra Dilworth, he's definitely proving to be the real deal, and performing very well through the first 4 practices.
And where did Ra come from? Remind me.
He came from North Carolina.
Okay.
He was one of, I guess, 3 transfers from the University of North Carolina. You also had Tamir Brown and I'm trying to draw a blank on the last name, but a couple of other defensive backs, a safety and a corner, in addition to Dilworth, who's an outside linebacker.
He seems to be very
D Nash.
He seems to be very very happy with the back end of the defense, which we lost a lot off of, but it didn't perform very well last year anyway. He seems to like our size back there a lot.
Yeah, he definitely does. He's made numerous comments about the improved length and athleticism and speed. We've been very good against the run, and now, with the improved length and athleticism, he thinks that we'll be able to defend the pass better. We'll have the opportunity, as Coach Harrell told us when he came on with us back a month or a little over a month ago now, just what we're able to do because we're 2 or 3 inches taller and faster compared to what we were in 2022.
He alluded, somebody asked him a question about the defense falling off at the second half of last year, and he alluded to a bit of a scheme change. Didn't give any details, but I found that interesting. Do you know anything about that, Bubba?
Not exactly. I think some of it may be what I was referencing. And he to be clear on what Coach Houston said at his post-practice press conference, he said it was twofold. One was personnel, and they certainly addressed that through the portal.
And the other was scheme.
And otherwise, and then the other was scheme. And with the scheme, he didn't elaborate a lot, but I would say that what I mentioned regarding playing more man coverage and then maybe bringing a little more pressure than we did a year ago. Because as we saw up in Philly at Lincoln Financial, we just got picked apart by E.J. Warner.
Yeah, and they kind of saw what Houston did to us and duplicated it. Thankfully, the offense decided to show up against Temple, unlike they did against Houston, and we won the shootout. But no, I think defense is going to be pretty good this year. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think special teams will be improved. I think defense will be improved. And I got a feeling in the running game, we're going to be just as good as we were last year. I think it's going to all come down to quarterbacks or receivers on how good this football team can be, and managing the schedule. Is another tall task because I don't, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I feel about going to divisions. Bubba and I don't know, maybe some of the listeners, I think people overthink things sometime, and they went with this no division format because of the playoffs changing to 24, and sometimes I think. The winner of your the winner of the divisions in this league would probably be your two best teams, regardless. And you think, okay, well, we're not going to do divisions, so it gives guys or teams a better chance to have the two highest ranked teams playing. But then you put SMU where they got to go on a short trip after playing a game on Saturday, and they got to come to Greenville and play on a Thursday night, and they're one of the conference favorites. And you talk about a good way to get upset after we're coming off of an off week. And, they're coming here on a Thursday night. You do things like that. That's a long trip for a Thursday night game. I really believe this conference, and I think it would help with season tickets, fan engagement, et cetera. If we would go to divisions, I would much rather be playing Memphis, South Florida, Florida Atlantic, Charlotte, Navy or UAB, depending on where you would put Navy, et cetera, than UTSA, SMU, Rice, and Tulsa. And I think they would also, from the flip side, rather be playing each other. I don't think this current format of the American is going to work. I think you're going to have to tweak it and go to divisions. If we stay at 14, who knows what's going to happen with conference realignment. But as the league sits now, I desperately think we need to go to divisions. Yeah,
that was mind-boggling to me when Jared said that UTSA will not play SMU anywhere until 2027.
Correct, in football.
That's correct. Yeah, in football. I mean, that blew my mind when he said that.
Yeah, it's nuts. And if we're gonna play, so all right. So think about that. We're in the same boat. We're gonna play. So evidently the cycle is 4 seasons of home and away, I guess. So we'll have what we have this year, home and away, for the next 4 years. Or the next 4 seasons. So. 23, 24, 25, 26. So that means we won't play Memphis or Temple or South Florida again until 27. Think about that, Bubba.
Yep. Yeah, that's
not going to work. That's not going to work. I'll make a guarantee right now. If this league stays as it is, we will go to divisions before 27 gets here. it's
I
just not
agree.
going to work.
I will not be surprised at all. I think they'll see that was a mistake, and like you mentioned, the history that exists between the Tigers and Pirates, going back to 1990, or maybe even the late 80s, but definitely played in 1990, I know, and yeah, back in the old Memphis State days.
91, that was our first win of the season after the loss
Yeah.
to Illinois.
They were coming off a win.
You win over UCLA. Yeah.
Over USC.
USC. I thought it was UCLA. Okay. Well, I was still pretty damn close going off memory.
Oh yeah.
But
not everybody's as sick as me in that regard. But
exactly.
Go ahead. What you had another?
Yeah, I just that's just it. I'm sure, I don't know how if other fans have thought about it, but it's just mind-boggling to me. And I mentioned it to Gilbert, and he said, well, he doesn't see a benefit. He doesn't see a benefit into playing rival schools and trying to create rivals with schools that aren't in your immediate region. He didn't see a difference between playing UTSA and Tulsa than playing Temple and Memphis. And I say BS.
Yeah, I definitely. On one hand, I see where he's coming from, but at the same time,
you damn sure can't just hop in the car and drive to San Antonio. You can to Philadelphia.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. What, about 7 hours or something like that from Greenville? Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So, but as far as East Carolina and Memphis are concerned, I mean, obviously,
and great football games.
Yeah, great football games. We had a stretch where we dominated them, and they had a stretch in the early 2000s when the Pirates were down where they dominated us. But all in all, behind East Carolina and Navy, UTSA, or actually, depending on the year, they're right there on the Memphis city. Of Memphis, they really support that program pretty well when they're competitive.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's just, I don't know. I'm beating a dead horse here, but who knows, Bubba? I really don't think this conference is going to stay as it is. Well, what's going on with the Pac-12, et cetera. But if it does, you got to you got to switch to divisions. But what else do we need to talk about? We can move on from that.
Yeah, shifting away from football, wanted to mention, some excellent news, for former Pirate baseball players. You have Lane Hoover, Carter Spivey, and then also Ben Terwilliger, who've been performing very well for the Florence Yaws in independent baseball, just south of Cincinnati there in northern Kentucky. You have Burley, and Burley had a tremendous month of July for the Cards. Hit right at 300. He started off August just as strong. He's hit at least 2 home runs already in August. And then obviously you have Connor Norby, who's in AAA in the Baltimore Orioles organization with the Norfolk Tides. And he's had at least 15 or 16 home runs to date. And just in the last 2 weeks, he's led off the game, I think, in the last 2 to 2.5 weeks with a home run 5 times, which is remarkable.
Yeah, that's beyond.
Not just hitting 5 home runs in 2 weeks, which is
let off the game.
Yeah, let off the game with a home run.
Yeah, so congratulations to him, and glad to see how these Pirates performing well in the pros, and hopefully more will make it up to the major leagues. It's only good for recruiting.
And Gavin Williams, can't leave out Gavin. He's been pitching very well for the Cleveland Guardians. Gavin had another excellent start recently. Probably didn't go as deep into the game as he would have liked, but went probably 5 innings, 2 runs on 4 hits. Unfortunately, Cleveland in that game, on which I want to say was against the Houston Astros in Houston, the Guardians got no hit. So he's really struggled not only in that game but in others to get much run support.
Yeah, no doubt.
You have Robert Dedrick chiming in on YouTube on shifting back to Pirate football. Had not seen this comment. He said Rajay Harris will play a significant role. Mike Houston said he's back to 100%.
Yes, he did.
Nathan Garcia mentioned how he helps him with the protections. Obviously, Rajay's been around since 2020, And when it comes to identifying everything that needs to be identified pre-snap, he can really help, and has a lot of experience under his belt as opposed to Mason.
Yeah, and said that like he hadn't been injured, which is big from a confidence standpoint. Now they're doing thud right now. Who knows how he'll react the first time he gets taken to the ground. But glad to see he looks like he's back to 100% practice and hadn't missed a beat.
Also have Kenneth Maynard chiming in on YouTube. Appreciate you tuning in. You may have been tuned in the past, but I believe a first-time commenter here. He says Stanford, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State, the Forgotten Four, as they're being referred to by the media. He said makes too much sense in the AAC with the ESPN and Eastern Time Zone exposure. And then he said if that does not work out with those remaining 4 schools from the Pac-12, he said Liberty may be a smart ad in the future.
Yeah, and I'm with him with those 4, and then you take 2 from the Mountain West, and you have a 20-team conference, and you do 4 to 5-team pods, and you can really make that work. Probably get 15, 16, 17 million per school, maybe up to 20 million. One thing that our previous guest mentioned that I didn't even think about is the exit fees from the Pac-12. If those 4 stay together, the Pac-12 will have a lot of money coming in with all the schools leaving. So that I didn't even think about that with those 4 trying to stay together. In the appeal of maybe being able to add some schools from the Mountain West and the American, if the schools that are being added are privy to those exit fees and it's not just going to go to those 4, then that could be a problem. But I'm hoping what will happen is they end up in the American, but it seems to never work out for East Carolina. He's right about Liberty. I think the Liberty Flames will end up in the American or the Sun Belt. I think in a hurry. They're going to dominate Conference USA, and I think they're going to pretty much force their way, despite people not wanting to be associated with them because of them being not a Christian school but an evangelical school. I think they're going to kind of push their way into the American or the Sun Belt, one or the other, and out of Conference USA version 5.
Some more Pirate baseball notes that I found here in my notes as we start to wrap things up. Zach Agnos obviously played a key role on the mound late in that 2022 season as the Pirates made the Super Regional run. I can't forget the way he closed out that game against UVA. Clark LeClaire was electric that night, but Zach is thriving in that role, and he now leads all of minor league baseball with 20 saves as he's pitching for the Fresno Grizzlies in low A ball. I believe that's the Colorado Rockies organization.
Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't been moved up from low A ball with those kinds of numbers, but I'm sure he will in time. And
earlier I referenced Carter Spivey. Carter, in his most recent start against Evansville back on August 3rd, 7 innings, shutout baseball, just 2 hits, 4 strikeouts, and 2 walks. So great to see Carter doing well. And then another note, the Pirates obviously headed to the Big House for the opener here in just less than 4 weeks. And Michigan will be unveiling a brand new state-of-the-art scoreboard. So that will be interesting to see on September 2nd.
Yeah, live on Peacock for anybody who hasn't realized that yet. If you want to watch Pirates play the Wolverines, you're going to have to subscribe to Peacock. Good thing is it's only like $5.95 a month, and it's worth it. You get if you're a wrestling fan, you get WWE Network included with that, plus tons of movies, and now Big Ten football. So Peacock is definitely the best value in streaming. So that is how you're going to have to watch the Pirates of the Wolverines. It's part of the new Big Ten's new television deal. So subscribe to Peacock if you ain't going to the Big House.
And Kyle, I'm sure you saw this. The broadcast team for that game will be Mike Tirico, play-by-play. Chris Sims, former Texas quarterback, son of Phil Sims, will be the analyst, and then Lewis Johnson on the sidelines.
It's Rico. That's big time.
Yep. And then one other note, Lincoln Riley, obviously the USC head coach, former East Carolina offensive coordinator. Very cool what he did, having the first annual Dave Nickel health check for the USC football staff, and said coaches have so often put their health off to the side. I mean, a very stressful job. Yes, they're compensated very well, but the demands are great. And but he says our hope is that this starts a trend around the nation to monitor these staffs and catch any issues before it's too late. We miss you, Dave.
Did we ever find out? And that's great by Lincoln Riley, and a very smart thing. And a cancer survivor here who has to get screened every 3 months, be it a CT scan or blood work, et cetera, et cetera. Once you have cancer and see it's a serious cancer, it's something you have to deal with the rest of your life. So I would advise anybody to get screened, and I'm glad that he's pushing for that for college coaches. Do we ever find out exactly what kind of cancer Dave Nickel had?
I want to say we did, but not recalling.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, not recalling.
No, you don't want to sit here and speculate on that if we don't.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate on that, but that was really the last thing that I had. I will say, promote our upcoming content. I know on Wednesday night, Kyle, you and Stevie Fly will have the debut episode of Just Another Sports Podcast. So we'll go in order here. Taking a look at Monday night's content, we will have a show here. Normally, we would not have a show with our general sports objective team of myself, Kyle, and Dave and Matt on a Monday night, but we will, up until the season, perhaps have that Monday show. Tomorrow we will have JC, Johnny Cornell of Gainesville, Florida. He was the Brian Bailey, if you will, of Gainesville, Florida, the local television station back during the Steve Spurrier years. He spent the last 20 plus in the financial planner, financial advisor industry. And so, but he still talks sports on the regular on podcasts and radio shows in Florida. So we'll talk to him. And then we'll also have Corey Glore, the voice of the Tulane Green Wave, return to the show to talk about Willie Fritz Club. Also tomorrow night at 7:00, prior to our show at 8:30, you will have Jeff Connors, another excellent conversation with a former Pirate great. You had Robert Jones last week. This week you have George Kuntz, Dr. George Kuntz, who was, as he refers not only to himself, but that Green Bay Packer fan base with all of his great years there in Green Bay, and he's still on the board of directors, I believe it is, for the Packers. He's referred to as the Doctor of Defense, and then you have obviously game week on that final week of August. Going into September, you have the Pirate Preview, where we'll take a look at that Michigan game. You'll have Sonny and Semenza on each and every Wednesday night, where they preview and take a look as it pertains to the betting odds, 5 or 6 of the top games of the week.
And for anybody that's not familiar with our show, that is former ECU linebacker Matt Semenza and former ECU tight end Jay Sunhalter, who is currently an ESPN analyst for Sonny and Semenza.
Yes, thank you for any new listeners out there that unsure who Sonny and Semenza are. And Justin, another sports podcast, and Kyle, tell folks what you and Stevie will be talking about each and every Wednesday night.
Yeah, I'll be joined by Northeast Academy head football coach Stevie Fly every week as we talk Pirate football. This week we will have Andrew Bays from the Pirate Sports Radio Network, former punter for East Carolina. We're going to break down special teams. We're going to talk about camp. We're going to talk about the broadcasting situation, at what extent Andrew Bays wants to. And then we will also we're going to do lists. Me and Stevie are both big on lists. This week's show, we will have the top 5 most memorable season openers in Pirate football history. I'll have my top 5. Stevie will have his top 5. If any of the listeners want to participate, have your top 5 ready. We'll put them up on screen. So that's what we'll be doing this week during the season. We will be previewing, along with Talking Pirate Football every week, whatever the best regional matchup is in the area, be it Coastal Carolina, Appalachian State, or North Carolina versus Clemson, whatever the best regional matchup is in this region for that week, along with previewing Pirate football. We will be doing that every week once the season starts, along with list. We will have a top 5 of some sort every week, Pirate football related. So stay tuned for that, and I hope you guys enjoy what we're doing. Me and Stevie will appreciate all the listeners we can get, and if you want to be the title sponsor of that podcast, you can reach out to me on Facebook, reach out to Bubba on Facebook, or what's our email, Bubba?
thesportsobj@gmail.com. Again, thesportsobj@gmail.com. And also kind of on a national scale, we'll have the Inside Slant each and every Thursday night. We'll take a look at some of the top games of the week with play-by-play voices and beat writers from around the nation. Fridays at noon, we'll have a recorded episode of A Pirate's Life for Me. Our most recent episode was about a month ago for that specific program. It was former East Carolina defensive lineman Alex Turner, who's now in med school out in Texas. So definitely go back and check that out. Actually going to be recording an episode for this Friday later tonight. It will be, loyal Pirate, diehard Pirate, and came from a East Carolina family, has 2 degrees from ECU, and that is Zach Daugherty for this coming Friday. Then you'll have Sights and Sounds, and that's when I travel to the games, or perhaps videos and pictures that I get from other Pirate fans who are in attendance. We'll have that for you on Saturdays. And then, of course, our Pirate football playback each and every Sunday night, presented by L&K Custom Homes. Appreciate former East Carolina defensive back Kevin Walker for his support of the program for a 3rd consecutive year. And so that will be where myself, Kyle, Dave, and Matt take a look back at the most recent game.
Yeah, there you go. So you got something to watch every night, listen to. It'll all be streamed live on Facebook and YouTube, then archived in podcast format. So if you enjoy what we do, tell people about it. Subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook. Whatever podcast format you listen to, subscribe and spread the word. Let people know the Sports Objective is out there, and we're keep this thing going. And one thing that Bubba didn't mention is, particularly for the playback this year, our Sunday show, looking back at the previous Saturday's football game between the Pirates and whoever, we will be taking phone calls. So, everybody gets to talk on the 5th quarter, but sometimes your mind's a little clearer a day later. You have a chance to think about things and kind of give your thoughts on the game before, and we'll talk about the game the following week. So every Sunday night, we'll be taking your calls on the Pirate football playback, which I think is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, great point with that 24-hour rule, so to speak. Once you've had a chance to let the smoke clear and maybe go back and watch some of it again, or at least play it back in your head and think about what transpired, your perspective definitely can change. So going to look forward to taking Pirate Nation's phone calls each and every Sunday night. But I have a few more comments here. Justin Butts saying, looking forward to another season. Part of my week catching you guys every night. I got y'all. I got y'all's back when I'm on the road. I appreciate that, Justin. You definitely provided us with some content last year. For instance, when the Pirates traveled out to Provo, as did some other Pirate fans like Diane and Britt Pons, I believe it was, or some other Pirate friends and family that made that trip out to BYU. But he says, always have you guys in the Queen Anne's Revenge on the way back to Greenville.
And if you don't know, Justin Butts drives the hauler there for ECU, back and forth games. So I'm sure he'll, just like he did that trip to Provo, get some great pictures heading into Ann Arbor and around Ann Arbor as he arrives in town with the hauler.
No doubt. Kyle, we'll go ahead and wrap this up, get out of here. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, be sure to follow us on social media, on X, on the former Twitter. You can follow us at The Sports OBJ on Instagram and TikTok. It's at The Sports Objective. And then like and follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we're closing in on 1,000 subscribers. But for Kyle Barber and then also Dave Richmond and Matt Semenza, you've been watching and listening to The Sports Objective. And we appreciate everyone tuning in. And as always, go Pirates.
And I don't back down, not at all. Find out when the cannons explode. From the sidelines down to the post. Put it down like not even close. All out to the last whistle blow. From the flag with the soul and crossbones. Everybody stand up, get your hands up. That a team Number 19, copy that. Everybody in the stands go bananas, scream loud, but they don't hold back. Every foot, every yard, every first down, every touchdown with the cannons blast. Get it on, get it all, get the wave going like a hurricane.